The Master Trials for Breath of the Wild marks the first time that Nintendo has attempted to do a DLC for the mainline Zelda franchise, and you know what? I think it's a pretty solid addition to the base game. Breath of the Wild was already a game that had a vast number of things to collect and challenges to overcome, but most importantly to Nintendo, it made them a lot of money, so why not add more content to it? This is where they gave us the double feature of the Master Trials and the Champion's Ballad, both within less than a year of Breath of the Wild's initial release. All for the low price of $20 too, which not that bad considering you actually get both of them. The pricing is pretty reflective of how much content is actually here because this isn't an old Hunters or Blood and Wine style expansion or anything. I would say it's something maybe a little bit closer to how the Fallout or Borderlands games handle their DLC, where you get maybe like a solid 5-ish hours of extra content for a slightly lower price. This type of stuff rarely wows me given the scale, and I typically think of it more as just a nice bonus or a cherry on top, and that's pretty much how I feel about the Master Trials here. This DLC offers a number of smaller things that I think are pretty handy or neat, but don't really make me love Breath of the Wild any more than I already do. While this does add quite a bit to the base game's challenge, I can tell you right now that I don't think that was something that necessarily appealed to everyone. I personally like this DLC a lot, even if I don't necessarily consider anything in here to be a must-play. Let's start with some of the more minor additions before we get into the main course. So, did you like the armor from the base game? Well, you definitely get a solid selection of additional armor pieces this time around, all being references to different Zelda games. You get Midna's helmet from Twilight Princess, giving you some extra resistance to Guardian damage, Majora's Mask, which thankfully doesn't possess you, but instead almost acts like the Stone Mask from its home game and makes you invisible to most enemies. There's the Korok Mask, which actually shakes if you're in the vicinity of a Korok, which can be very useful. Tingle's entire armor set can be looted, which gives you increased speed at night because anyone who wears something this shady should not be trusted. But the set that I stuck to was the Phantom set from Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, which basically just gives you increased damage. It even has a higher defense value than the standard Barbarian set, and it's in a much easier to reach location if you want to try to snag it early. You unfortunately can't dye these armor sets or upgrade them at fairy fountains, so they're incredibly powerful early game, but they start to fall off a little bit during the late game. You'll find all of these by locating a few select books around Hyrule Field, seeing the riddles, and then definitely figuring them out yourself instead of searching them up online. I'd estimate it'd probably take you around 2 to 3 hours with solving the riddles, or maybe an hour and a half if you just follow a guide. There are some other items too, such as a great QOL feature being the Travel Medallion. This essentially acts as a spot that you can put down at any location on the map and teleport there much like it was a shrine. Personally, a big fan of this for farming dragon scales. Love this thing. One of the more weird additions here was the Hero's Path mode. This more or less acts like CCTV footage of Link's map screen that shows you the exact route you took in the past 200 hours of playtime, that even shows where you died. Again, a neat feature, but outside of maybe just getting a little boost of nostalgia of seeing your previous journey, this doesn't really have too much of a functional purpose. Finally, and probably the thing that will keep most people busy overall, is the new Master Mode that essentially makes Breath of the Wild a far more challenging experience, to the point where I'm not actually sure if I would call it better or not. Like, don't get me wrong, getting surprises like new enemy placements such as goons on Octorok balloons, or a fucking Lionel in the middle of the Great Plateau are really funny, but the rest of the challenges don't exactly make Breath of the Wild better. Now, all the enemies in the game will essentially be ranked up a tier, making them deal a little bit more damage while also having higher pools of health. Even worse than that, enemies also regen their health now, which can honestly just make fights drag on way longer than they should. I really don't think that they should have added this in the first place. Your weapons are still going to wear out at the same pace, but now the enemies have more sustain, which this just makes one of people's biggest issues with Breath of the Wild effectively more prevalent. I could see this mode maybe being a little interesting if you grab the DLC armor early, and then maybe use Majora's Mask to stealth around Hyrule Castle to get some really strong endgame loot, but again, I would not say that this is a superior way of playing the game. I personally didn't play around with this mode too much because I got my fill of difficulty in the main draw of the DLC. The The Trial of the Sword is something that is both familiar but also new for the Zelda series. Earlier games like Wind Waker and Twilight Princess had stuff like the Savage Labyrinth or the Cave of Ordeals that tested Link and his combat capabilities of ever-increasing challenges, but neither of them really handles things quite like how Breath of the Wild does. You begin this trial by returning to the Great Deku Tree and plunging the Master Sword back into its pedestal, where you're taken to a new shrine-like challenge that will ask Link to go through a number of rooms until he reaches the end, in which the Master Sword will be increased in strength. There are 3 levels to this, being beginner, middle, and final, and upon completing each, the Master Sword's attack power will be increased by 10 points, capping out at 60 after finishing all 3. A pretty sweet reward that makes the Master Sword go from an honestly sort of mid weapon to being one of the overall strongest in the entire game, which, since it can always recharge, I consider it to be worth your time going after. That is, if you are up for the challenge, because this is hands down the most difficult thing that you can do in Breath of the Wild. Main reason for this, Link is going into this challenge with absolutely nothing. No weapons, no food or potions, no champion abilities. He's not even allowed to bring the clothes that he's wearing in. Everything you find has to be procured on site, which, let me tell you, that really makes the first room you enter just a complete mad scramble as you desperately try to find the means to defend yourself. Thankfully, you do keep your heart and stamina amount that you had before you entered the trial, as well as your Sheikah Slate abilities, and if you wanted to drink a potion or eat a meal that gives you some extra health or a buff, you can eat or drink that before you enter, which is kind of a decent way of cheesing the system. I honestly recommend doing that too, because you're going to need all the help you can get. When you die in one of the tiers of the challenge, you start over. And you will die, since a lot of these room setups can honestly be pretty damn nasty, with enemies having ranged attacks, ones that will alert the whole mob, surprises like having a guardian immediately attack you, or some that have some environmental hazards that need to be dealt with in creative ways. At the same time though, I think it's a very great challenge because it encourages you to clear rooms as quickly as you can, while also keeping your weapon and arrow supply up, and finding as much optional loot as possible. The higher your game knowledge, the better off you'll be making your way through these challenges, because you'll know what meals you need to cook for the biggest benefits, or what environmental hazards you can use to your advantage, or what certain enemies are weak to, which will give you the ability to quickly get rid of them, or using bombs to have fall damage do some of the heavy lifting for you. This is a series of challenges that I think are no doubt difficult, but they actually do a really great job of teaching the player how to be better at the game. It essentially breaks Breath of the Wild down to its core combat mechanics and puts you into a progression system that only takes about 30 minutes or so to get through, rather than the standard 40 to 50 hours that Breath of the Wild would usually demand. You know, I actually wouldn't mind seeing something like this being implemented into some sort of roguelite mode. Roguelite additions to single-player games seems to be like an ever-increasingly popular thing, with the likes of the Valhalla update for God of War Ragnarok and the No Return mode in The Last of Us Part 2. So I could honestly see it working here too, especially with the number of different room layouts that they already have. Probably something that won't ever happen, but who knows, maybe in the next Zelda game. Quick little video for you guys today. So let's wrap this up by saying that I think that the Master Trials is a solid DLC for Breath of the Wild. I do wish that Nintendo would have included it with the Switch 2 update for the game, but you know, Nintendo is the master company of one step forward and one very confusing and stupid step back. Is this DLC a must play? I don't think so. I could definitely see the challenge being off-putting to some people, and the new armor sets are cool if you're a massive Zelda nerd like me, but they don't really add that much to the game. There's some decent QOL here, and a lot of options if you want to challenge yourself, but for the most part, I don't think anything here would ever change anyone's mind about Breath of the Wild. That being said, if you loved Breath of the Wild and never had a chance to experience the DLC before, this and the Champion's Ballad are $20, and you'll definitely get some solid entertainment out of it, which is why I can overall still recommend the Master Trials to you.